Okay, hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is Emil, and in today's video we're going to run through the top 3 airline stocks in Europe. So I've chosen the three biggest by market cap. Okay, so the 3 airlines we're going to look at are, so up here you'll see the biggest airlines by passengers carried in the world. So the 4 biggest ones are in the US. We're going to look at Ryanair in today's video. It's Irish, I'm from Ireland. We're also going to look at Lufthansa, and we're going to look at IAG. And IAG own Iberia, British Airways and Aer Lingus. So they're the 3 biggest airlines in Europe. And just to give you an idea of their size by revenue, Lufthansa is number 3 in the world, IAG number 6, and Ryanair carries a lot of passengers but doesn't make as much revenue as the other 2. I've gone through all 3 of these companies' investor relations pages and their annual reports just to get the full idea and full picture of these 3 companies. So if you appreciate that, me taking the time to do that, I'd hugely appreciate a like. And if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, subscribe. And with that said, let's get straight into it. So just before we get started, I'll quickly give you an idea of why I'm interested in European airline stocks. Clearly, because of the coronavirus, they're all going to take a huge hit on earnings and revenue. So I expect these stock prices to continue falling in the next couple of months. A couple of them have already been hit very hard. So their earnings and revenue is going to be hit hard, and their stock price is probably going to reflect that. I wanted to diversify outside of the United States. And the United States airlines, if you read the statistic here, the USA, the 5 leading airlines, I forget them off the top of my head, Delta, American Airlines, etc. The 5 biggest ones, they own 86% of the market share. Now Europe has way more airlines than the US, but they're all generally consolidating. And once they consolidate, this is when the profits can start to come in better for all the bigger airlines. So they're a little bit behind the American airlines in that regard. So yeah, you can see the 5 biggest ones only have 51%. But they're continually acquiring the smaller airlines. So eventually I'm looking out in the future of like 5 to 10 years when there's less competition and these companies can start actually making some decent money. Because at the moment their stock price is kind of up and down and their revenue is growing steadily, but you know, it's a vicious industry in Europe at the moment. So obviously with the coronavirus, they're all grounding their planes. A lot of their planes, and obviously the less efficient ones, are getting grounded pretty much permanently. At the moment, all 3 airlines are upgrading their fleet to have more efficient planes for fuel costs. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is IAG. IAG own, this is the kind of swankier ones, British Airways and Iberia. They also have Aer Lingus and Iberia Express. And I don't really know, I haven't used these 2, Vueling and Level, but I know Aer Lingus is really nice, good service. Iberia is really lovely as well. So I'm interested in investing in these companies because I've actually used their services, whereas like with the American Airlines, I've never used them before. So that's just a little tip for yourself. It's always good it's always like maybe a 5 to 10% advantage if you've actually used the product or service yourself. So like if you're trying to invest in another country, you're kind of at a disadvantage if you haven't actually used the product or the service. So I have a actual inside understanding of these companies. So if you live in Asia, maybe it'd be better for you to look at Asian airlines rather than American or European airlines. So that's why I'm also interested in European airlines. Okay, so on top of that, they also have cargo. They do shipping as well, just like Lufthansa as well. So as you can see, IAG, this is the chart for IAG. They've taken a huge hit as a result of the coronavirus, well down almost 60% from that little peak there. But yeah, there was a little run up before it, but you can see they haven't been this low since like 2013. So just to get you an idea, and this is their trailing PE ratio is 1.3, so like crazy low. And it won't be the same for the forward, as their earnings are going to take a really big hit. So IAG own Iberia, Aer Lingus and British Airways. Really customer focused, All those three airlines I've flown with Iberia and Aer Lingus, and yeah, really nice to fly on. So that's one of the reasons I'm interested in that. Kind of mid-tier flights, not like super cheap flights, either Iberia or Aer Lingus. They're kind of, a little bit on the pricier side. Well, not pricey, but average price flight. The British Airways pilots had a strike in 2019. This right here is where the British Airlines pilots had a strike. So you can see there was quite a substantial drop. But then they got it sorted and it went back up, and then the coronavirus hit. One of the problems with IAG is owning British Airways, and there's a lot of speculation and there's a lot of uncertainty with regards to Brexit and whether this will impact their earnings, and it's just going to make everything a little bit more complicated, whereas Ryanair and Lufthansa don't have that problem to the same extent, because it's going to be a problem with taxes and restrictions in and out of the country and everything. So no one really knows what's going to happen with Brexit yet, but that's just something to be aware of. I don't think it will impact them too seriously, and there's like a couple of years, 1 or 2 years after, if there's a no deal for Brexit, where it's likely that things won't change at all. They're going to give them a grace period to settle in, so nothing too worrying straight away. All three airlines are very environmentally focused, and that's because you have to pay huge taxes on CO2 emissions if you're an airline in Europe. It's a bit ridiculous because it doesn't really reduce it that much, but all of them, like if you read through all three of their investor relations, they're continually going on about their environmental reduction in CO2 emissions. So all three companies are quite highly leveraged, so they owe money for planes that are coming in, new planes, more environmentally efficient planes that are coming in. But IAG is quite highly leveraged. They've acquired a good few smaller airlines as well recently. So yeah, they're the parent company for those three, but they also own a few more smaller ones. They're quickly go through their numbers. I've done this in more detail later on as a head-to-head comparison between these companies at the end, so we can see which is the best in the end. So make sure you stick around to the end to see my pick and what I think of all three individually and how they stack up against each other. Okay, we have a market cap of 4.3, 1.3 PE ratio, we saw that. Revenue 26 billion, cash. Okay, so this is a quick look at their balance sheet. They have almost 7 billion in cash, which is good. 3 billion in long-term debt, not too bad at all. So their total assets is 35 billion, but they have 4 billion which is intangible, 19 billion net property and plant, which is their planes mostly, and 2 billion receivables, which is tickets people have purchased but haven't paid for. So this is pretty much gone. So their actual usable assets to pay off their debt is 10 billion, and their total liabilities is 28. So not like an okay balance sheet for the industry, but as a balance sheet in total, not great. Yeah, I mentioned they've been acquiring brands, different ones. So they acquired Air Europa for 1 billion, which is not great timing. They probably could have picked it up now at this time for cheaper. And I'm sure all these three companies are looking at perhaps picking up some smaller airlines that are going to be heavily impacted at the moment because of the coronavirus, and pick them up for cheap. So yeah, what they're trying to do with Air Europa, they're trying to turn Madrid into a hub in Europe. So similar to Amsterdam, Frankfurt, London and Paris, they want Madrid to be another hub, and this would be the hub for Europe, connecting to the Americas. So like Iberia, when I flew to Central America, Panama, I went through Madrid, so that would be kind of the link between the Americas and Europe. They want Madrid to be that link, which is a good idea. I think it makes sense. So they want to be the market leader for Latin America and the Caribbean for Europe. So this was their expected expenditure until 2022, but they'll probably reduce this significantly, and because they won't be earning pretty much anything for the next couple of years. But unfortunately, a lot of this payment is replacement fleet, so hopefully they can defer the payment, or ask the Boeing or Airbus to hold off for a minute. But yeah, they're getting upgrades for their fleet, which is good. This is just something funny that I heard. This logo cost something like 10 or 50 million dollars or euro that they spent on this logo, upgrading their logo. It was just a normal shamrock before, and then they changed it to this shamrock, which is tilted and it has love hearts. So yeah, money well spent, right? Just thought I'd add that in. Okay, the next company is Ryanair. This is a completely Irish company, so that's one reason I'm interested in it. Obviously, want to support my country, but it was kind of the first airline to do super cheap short haul flights. Kind of almost invented that. So when you're taking a Ryanair flight, it almost feels like you're taking a bus. It doesn't really feel like you're going on a nice plane ride. But like a lot of people don't really care if I'm going from Dublin to London. It's just 1 hour that I sit on a plane. Don't really care if it's like the most comfortable, relaxing time of my life. Just going to get from A to B for as cheap as possible. And like a lot of Ryanair flights are like 20 euro, so like pretty much next to nothing, like cheaper than a bus ride. So Ryanair are all about efficiency. So like efficiency with spending, efficiency with their planes and their staffing, and cost cutting absolutely everywhere in the business. It's all about just being super cheap, and no one can be cheaper than them. They're just so good at it. This is just another funny thing. Michael Ayeri, he's the CEO. You can see him driving around Dublin in his Bentley, and he has a taxi sign on his Bentley, so he's allowed to get chauffeured around, and he can drive in the taxi lanes, so he can beat the traffic and skip everyone in the traffic. Just thought that was funny. So the Ryanair hasn't been hit too badly from the coronavirus. It was already down a little bit. It probably has the best balance sheet out of the three, so that's why it hasn't been hit as hard. People are saying that that's probably the company that's definitely the most likely to survive, as the fastest grower of the three. But it's also because of that, it's the most expensive. Its current PE ratio or trailing PE ratio is 8, but no one really knows what the forward PE ratio is, but they have it down as 16 because of the coronavirus. And yeah, there's always demand for super cheap short haul flights, and on the other end of corona, if there's a bad recession, people will still continue to get in the cheapest flights. So as I said already, Ryanair is all about efficiency. So as you can see, they're the most carbon efficient airline, so they have the most up-to-date. So Ryanair have the newest planes, the most efficient planes, because they don't want to be spending money on fuel. They want to spend as little as possible. And they spend less money on fuel, and then likewise they spend less money on taxes for their CO2 emissions. That's their slogan: more choice, lower fares and great care. So they have the most routes in Europe as well. They have like, you can go from anywhere to anywhere with Ryanair, and there's dozens and hundreds of short haul flights all around. They do go to outside of Europe as well, but it's mostly just in Europe. So yeah, that puts them in a good position right now. So this is their COVID-19 update. They were the only ones who had an update on their investor relations page, so that was good to see that they're trying to be transparent with their investors. So at the moment they're only doing 20 flights, which is 99% less than normal. So there's only like emergency flights at the moment. If people need to get home, they need a reason to fly. So yeah, as I mentioned, they have the best balance sheet. They own 77% of their own fleet, debt free, which is great. So yeah, 4 billion in cash. So what they're going to do with COVID, they're deferring their capital expenditures, suspending their share buybacks, which all companies have been doing quite a lot, freezing recruitment and discretionary spending, and the big one is cutting all pay by 50%, including the senior management, for April and May. And they're trying to get support from the government to help them with their pay. But Ryanair are sitting on the sidelines waiting to straight away go back into full capacity, which I don't know if this is a great idea. Like, I don't think they'll need full capacity straight away. I think, yeah, they're just trying to go after the maximum possible. We'll see in a minute that Lufthansa is actually downsizing their entire fleet and downsizing altogether because of the coronavirus. They think it's going to last years, whereas Ryanair think it's just going to last a couple of months. So their fleet numbers have been growing up steadily. Now they have 450 planes, and this drives down their fares. So now their average fare price is just over, it's like 36 euro. Their average flight fare is 36 euro. So that's super cheap, obviously, which means they have more transporting more people. Now they have 140 million people a year, 2019. Grows the network, so they're going to more airports and more routes. Drives ancillaries, and which increases revenue and shareholder returns. So that's their distribution in the form of dividends and buybacks. Now, obviously, so yeah, they're the lowest average fare worldwide. So there's a quick look at their chart. It's a kind of a nice grower in comparison to the other ones. Particularly in the last few years, it's really grown quite a lot. But they've been hit hard. I think they got a little bit overvalued, and now they spike back up, but have dropped again because of coronavirus. So yeah, they're much pricier than the other two, but we'll see that in the end. I just want to give you a look at their chart so you can kind of see where they're at. Okay, finally, Lufthansa. So Lufthansa they do a lot of cargo, so they're not just passengers. Their stock price is at an all-time low. So this is their stock price since 97. And you can see it's actually an all-time low. How crazy is that? So as I mentioned, Lufthansa have been very proactive in regards to the coronavirus. They've heavily reduced their fleet sizes and are just downsizing in every aspect for the next 3 years anyway. So that's probably one of the reasons their stock price has been dropping so significantly. They, at the current price, their previous dividend would give you a yield of 10%, but this dividend has obviously been halted. All the dividends for all three companies have been halted. Ryanair hadn't really been paying out a dividend the last couple of years anyway. They've just been doing buybacks. But yeah, they have trailing PE of 2.8, which is obviously fucking nothing. But yeah, they're burning €1 million an hour, so they're most likely to go bankrupt out of all the three. But I think this is still a low probability because they are being kind of cautious with the future. Okay, so now the moment you've all been waiting for, the head-to-head. So I'm not sure which company sounded the most attracted to you during the last three slides, but let's see the numbers, see how the numbers stacked up. So on the left, we have the sections, and then these are the three companies, and this is the numbers, and this is my rating in regards to those numbers, if you know what I mean. So like revenue growth, this is out of 5. So Ryanair have obviously had pretty good revenue growth in comparison to the other two. So they've had 8% in the last 5 years averaged. IAG's had 3% and Lufthansa's had 3%. So I gave them a rating of 4. I gave IAG a rating of 2. And I gave Lufthansa a rating of 1. You might ask why only a rating of 1. Well, Lufthansa's profitability has been really heavily reducing, and IAG's has been increasing, so that's why it's getting the higher rating there. But obviously Ryanair is the best growth. Previous dividend, Ryanair didn't have any dividend, but I still gave them a rating of 1 because they'd had a dividend 2 or 3 years ago, so they had dividends before, so maybe in the future they'll have them again. IAG had a yield of 0.15%, which is obviously extremely low, and a payout ratio of 0.3. So 30% of their earnings was going to the dividend. So this is not a nothing dividend, so a rating of 2. And Lufthansa, the yield is 10% with also a payout ratio of 0.3. But I'm only giving a rating of 2 because the dividend's being suspended just like the other two. So, and it's not likely to come back to that for a long time. Balance sheet, we'll do the balance sheet analysis now. So this is cash 3 billion, total assets 13 billion, and their debt 8 billion. So pretty good balance sheet. IAG 7 billion cash, 35 billion total assets, and 28 billion in liabilities. So about equal to Ryanair's by percentage wise. And Lufthansa has an awful balance sheet. 3.3 billion in cash, 13 billion total assets, and 32 billion in total liabilities. So that's why that's a really, really bad balance sheet. So that's why it's gotten a risk of -4. This is a risk of -2, and this is a risk of -1. So the previous buybacks, this was 4% of the market cap of Ryanair each year, which is quite a lot. So I gave them a rating of 3. IAG is 12%. This was 4% of Ryanair's previous stock stock price, whereas this is 12% of IAG's current stock price that they're buying back in the form of buybacks. So it's probably about 6% of their previous. So yeah, another rating of 3. I couldn't find on Lufthansa's buybacks, but I believe they were doing buybacks, maybe just dividends, but I couldn't find it anywhere. So unknown, so I just gave them a rating of 2. Risk, we went through that. PE ratio and price to sales ratio. PS is price to sales ratio. So Ryanair is the highest of the 3, so there's a PE ratio of 11 and a price to sales of 1.3. So that gives them a rating of 3. Probably should have given them a rating of 2 in comparisons to the other ones, actually. Anyway, IAG has a PE of 3.2. This is trailing, and 0.8 price to sales. So really, really cheap stock. And the cheapest of the bunch, Lufthansa, PE ratio of 3 and a price to sales of 0.1. So super, super, super cheap. So a rating of 5. And this is the total. So let's say Ryanair and IAG both get 9 and Lufthansa gets 6. So which is the best in my opinion? For me, I'm not interested in Lufthansa. Looking through their investor relations page, there was nothing that was really grabbing my attention for the future. Whereas Ryanair and IAG just seem a lot more safe, to be honest. Like Ryanair's growing quite fast. There's going to be growth ahead. It has great brand name, great brand image for cheapness, for cheap flights, and I just think there's always going to be demand for super cheap flights where people just want to get from A to B no matter what. IAG similarly have great brands, British Airways, Iberia and Aer Lingus. People really like flying with them because they're great customer service. Lufthansa I've actually never flown with, maybe I have flown with them, but so not a memorable flight anyway. And their balance sheet is really, really putting me off. I know it's super, super cheap, so you could go for this if you want the high risk to high reward, but be very careful. Like they're downsizing, so their PE ratio isn't going to remain this low for the whole year, you know. But I do like the fact that they're downsizing, which means they're a little bit safer. But for me, I'm going to be continuously look into Ryanair and IAG. So what I'm doing, so I couldn't really decide between them. They're all kind of similar. I did rule out Lufthansa as a buy for me. What Warren Buffett did in America, he couldn't decide between the airlines, so he bought like pretty much all of them, a portion of all of them, just to get exposure to the industry. So that could be an idea. That's one idea that I'm interested in doing. So I'm most interested, as I mentioned, in IAG and Ryanair, but I'm gonna open an initial position in both of them, but a very small one, because I think the next few months could be very volatile in these, and I could easily see these stock prices continuing to drop, even though like their price to earnings ratio is already so low. Because their earnings are going to drop so significantly, their price to earnings ratio could continue to their stock price could continue to fall and remain in line with that price to earnings ratio. The airline industry is a cyclical industry, so a cyclical industry basically means like it goes up, it goes down, it goes up and down. So we're not really sure if we're in a natural bottom of a cycle. We're definitely in a bottom of a cycle, but I'm not sure if this is the natural cycle that the airline industry goes through. So we could get the wave of the lower end of the cycle on top of this coronavirus drop in the next few months or year. So that's why I'm just interested in opening a small position, because I'm not sure if this is going to drop even lower. So yeah, I think we're going to have low prices for airlines for a few years. Like I don't see these bouncing back fast, so I'm not too worried about buying it straight away. I think we'll have plenty of buying opportunities in these 3 companies for the next while, so there's no rush to buy them in my opinion. So obviously all these 3 companies are quite risky at the moment, so I wouldn't go crazy with investing the house into them right now, but they're definitely at an extremely cheap valuation, so I'm definitely interested in buying some. If you want to have a look at 3 less risky stocks, more safe stocks, I'll link that video at the end. If you enjoyed this video and you learned anything, I'd hugely appreciate it if you could drop me a like. That would help a lot. Subscribe for more videos like this. I have some really interesting ones coming up. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Check out the less risky stocks here. Thanks again. Cheers. Bye.